Caped Crusader, the watchful protector, the world's greatest detective, the Dark Knight. Batman. When you think of Batman, I'm sure you think of a character that is dark and gritty. You think about Batman's bone-cracking, fighting style, his way of creeping in the shadows and striking fear into the hearts of criminals. That isn't always how it's been though. Let me explain. The original concept of Batman came from writer and artist Bob Kane in the 1930s. He was inspired by Sherlock Holmes, Zorro, and a sketch of a Leonardo da Vinci flying device design that kind of looked like a bat. His version of Batman is nothing like we have now. He's wearing a red suit with black trunks and those black boots, the little mask and giant black bat wings to match, along with the blonde hair. Thankfully, this is not the design we got. Bob Kane took his idea to his writer, Bill Finger. Finger took Kane's idea and ran with it. He thought that Kane's idea was just too similar to Superman with bat wings and a mask. Finger replaced the Da Vinci-inspired wings with a cape, he gave him gloves, and changed the character's bodysuit from red to gray. Possibly most important, Finger found a book with a picture of a bat, and from that, he was encouraged to tell Kane to replace the character's domino-style mask with a more bat-like hooded cowl, complete with the bat ears, which would make the character stand out even in silhouette. From there we got the character that resembles a little bit more of the Batman we know and love today. It actually took a long time for Bill Finger to receive the credit that he deserved in creating Batman. There are a ton of details in all of that story, but that's another story for another time. Comic books have changed a lot over the years, but one of the big changes that almost ruined the Caped Crusader himself was his own comics. Some people can recognize what is currently being done in the comics and the smart and interesting stories that they're trying to tell, but that was not always the case. Batman was originally a darker detective story type comic, but after the Second World War ended, they tried to mix things up with many different comic characters, which of course included Batman. This is known as the Silver Age of Comics. This is also where you'll find a lot of wacky, weird, and goofy visuals and storylines. Weird in comics can be good, but not like this, and definitely not to a character like Batman. And many people think now that the campy Adam West TV show was meant to be that. Just campy. Although it is loved today, it's not necessarily made to be funny or campy on purpose. It just reflected the comics at the time.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
In the 70s, Dennis O'Neil and Neal Adams wanted to bring Batman back to the way he was originally meant to be. They wanted to bring him back to his roots. They wanted to try to tackle more real-life stuff, and that was happening across other titles and characters too. They portrayed Batman as more of a brooding detective, like he should be, and like he kind of was originally, and they challenged him not only as a hero, but as a person too. People were looking for something just totally different from anything that they've ever seen in a comic before, and this is where a man by the name of Frank Miller stepped in. Frank Miller made a name for himself by doing a 22-issue run over at Marvel for Daredevil. The DC president at the time wanted something and someone to help push their comics forward, and Frank was their guy. They gave Miller basically full control of whatever story he wanted to tell, and he came up with one of the greatest comic book stories ever told in The Dark Knight Returns. I believe that this showed the world the full potential of the comic book medium. Miller wanted The Dark Knight Returns to reflect more of actual modern America. He wanted it to be something that people could connect to and recognize, even though it was extremely exaggerated. This was the most influential change for the already legendary character of Batman. Miller made Batman a retired 55-year-old, not a fresh, young, at the top of his game 20 or 30-year-old. Batman was brought into a new light where people who would read this comic could see that he was tackling some real-life issues that they themselves may be dealing with. This made Batman more understandable and even more vulnerable than he ever was before. It was not in between other stories or connected to a greater story arc. It stood alone. Miller didn't write this like a novel though. He expertly used the comic panels to get across the movement and emotion needed. Miller really dove in to what makes Batman tick and even what makes Bruce Wayne tick. He wanted to get inside their heads and kind of deconstruct the hero and the person. The Dark Knight Returns was a new way to look at comics, and it influenced Batman comics from there on out. Frank Miller really redefined who Batman is and why he does what he does. Every interpretation of Batman since has elements from his work. The comics, the movies, the TV shows, and the video games all have some inspiration from The Dark Knight Returns. Miller has even inspired others to try to take a deeper look at other heroes too. Comic characters now have become so complex that they can even be studied. I think this book shows that comic books are just as valid and just as capable of telling good stories, just like TV or movies. And The Dark Knight Returns showed a new way to approach the story and structure of comics. If you look at comics since then, they all have some inspiration from The Dark Knight Returns. Not only did Batman's greatest transformation positively affect and expand his character, it also affected all of comics for the better too.